You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, episode number 22. Have you ever had something happen in your life that just turned your world upside down, where you no longer knew up from down? We all have experienced at least one episode in our lives where we were really taken back. Perhaps it's a relationship breakdown, the unexpected redundancy package you took as you were forced out, an illness, or even the loss of a loved one. The truth is, life is short. We can get so wrapped up in our day to day that we forget to be appreciative of what we have. And when something happens to knock us out of our orbit, the realities of life smack us in the face like a sledgehammer. Today we're talking about what it takes to make it through the seemingly impossible. This includes the practical things you can do when times get tough to help you get through it in one piece. My guest today, Lucy Werner, is an author, speaker, teacher, PR expert, and founder of The Wern, an award-winning PR and branding consultancy for startups and entrepreneurs. But that's not what Lucy's here to talk about today. You see, Lucy knows all too well what it's like to feel the weight of that sledgehammer. Just last year, in 2019, Lucy and her family began to face the unspeakable. Not only did her mother suffer a brain aneurysm, her husband made redundant, and her father, who suffers from frequent memory wipes from stress, diagnosed with prostate cancer, but the birth of her second son dealt a hand she never saw coming. He was born with 3 congenital heart defects. One is extremely rare. It only affects 1 in 10,000 babies, and only 3 surgeons globally could fix it. Life is nowhere close to what Lucy expected it to look like. But both her parents are now on the mend. Her little guy has made it through several surgeries already, with more to come, and her business has had to adapt every step of the way. Lucy knows that working, especially as a freelancer, with a baby in intensive care is not a subject that is often spoken about. So she's here to change that. Like all the topics that we tackle on this podcast, you don't have to relate directly with Lucy's story. It may not even be health issues that has turned your world upside down. Lucy is sharing tips with us today on how to make it through the seemingly impossible, whatever that is for you. Life may not be turning out the way you expected at this moment, but you are not alone. Ready to hear Lucy's top tips that have the power to help you through this? I'm telling you, you don't want to miss this. So, let's dive right in and let you meet my friend, Lucy.
You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, where we firmly believe that you, and only you, have the power to make the changes you seek in your life. Survivor of 10 years of child abuse, Lisa Sabaniak, will help you to empower yourself to overcome your limitations, in whatever form they take, to build the life you truly deserve. It's time to hear from fellow experts who know firsthand what building a successful and satisfying life because of our past experiences is like, and exactly what it takes to do it. If you're ready, willing and able to get honest with yourself, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty with the hard work that lasting change takes, you're in the right place. Here's your host, NLP practitioner, speaker, Reiki master, author, and chipaholic, Lisa Sabaniak.
Today's episode is dedicated to yogadownload.com, a fantastic website providing so many yoga videos to download, it's almost overwhelming. Those that know me know that yoga is a big part of my life, and it has been now for a couple of decades. I first found yoga like a lot of people. I was looking for something to help me stay fit while calming my mind. I soon discovered that yoga was so much more than that. Being a survivor of child abuse meant for me that I had detached myself from not only the abuse and others who could hurt me, but even myself. Yoga was the very first time that I could feel some discomfort and not panic. In fact, feeling that discomfort gave me strength because I also realized I had full control. I could ease further into the pose or I could back off until the discomfort lifted. It was the very first time that I felt empowered, and it was a decade after leaving my abuser. I was hooked. Now, I know a lot of people don't have the funds or the time to head out to a yoga studio a few times a week, and while I do recommend that that is the greatest way to start your yoga practice, this is a perfect solution if time and money is the deterrent. Head on over to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga, to read more about yogadownload.com and even learn my personal favorites. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga. And hi, Lucy. Welcome to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Well, I want to dive right in because we have so much to talk about. And I mean, you have dealt with so much with your partner's redundancy, your father being ill with his stress-related memory wipes, and then the prostate cancer, your mom's brain aneurysm. And the whole time that that's going on, you're planning for the C-section of your second child. And now you're still building a business at that exact same time. Yeah. I want to know what pushed you through choosing to stick with your business and bring your partner into the fold rather than just giving up mercy on the whole thing.
I think part of the reason I could keep going is I did actually sit in January of this year before all of this happened, and I wrote myself some goals for the year. And the main goal, the main objective for me was to try and get a book deal. And I actually ended up securing my book deal by the end of January.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so because of that, my whole 2019, everything I was doing was all about getting enough money to be able to sort of cover a chunk of my own maternity and building up my profile and my audience so that when the book came out in January 2020, I actually had somebody to sell it to and people actually knew who I was and that I knew what I was talking about. So the book is called Hype Yourself. And right at the beginning, me and my publisher laughed about how, because it was coming out in January, and that's the time that a lot of people seek self-help, that actually for business owners, they could use it as a self-hype book, and it's going to help people hype themselves and really putting on that word help. And I think I just sort of clung to that book for dear life and thought, I've come this far, I've got to keep going. And the book was just really the bit that I kind of used to sort of see myself climbing through the trenches, just holding this book up, like, I'll keep going, I just got to get that book out.
That's amazing. So that one single thing, it just kind of drove everything.
Yeah, it really did. And because it's like it was the top of the pyramid, I guess. Like that was the book was like, that's what I'm going to launch in January 2020. So if I didn't keep the book going, everything I planned this year was, I guess I felt like it would all fall apart if I just didn't keep going with that book. But because I kept going with that book, it meant I was doing podcasts or doing the odd event or showing up online a lot as well. So I was still giving out a lot of tips and advice, and actually even in some of my darker days, I wouldn't ever talk about what was happening on my social media. The days where I would say, does anybody want any help or advice, was sometimes my worst days. Right. And I almost used the business as a mask, really, to hide what was happening. And that kind of thing that sometimes people will say to you, like, if you look in a mirror and smile, you'll start smiling.
Yes.
It was like that, the business was my smile, I guess.
Right. And the more you're putting out there and offering to help other people, the more you're kind of saying to the universe, I'm open for the same sort of love to come back to me.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, I was really well supported by the freelance community in a way that I am so thankful for. And it took me a long time with my first child, every time I was given a gift, I wrote down who'd given it to me and what they'd given, so I could send them a photo or make sure I sent them a thank you. And when I had a lot of support during this period of time that was difficult, I felt I had to go back and say thank you to everybody until a friend sort of pointed out to me that that's not what people were doing it for. Um,
Yeah.
I had like cards and letters and one person, like lots of people I've never even met who are just in that freelance world that I'm in, who would send me like maybe a book that was a favorite book of their child that I could read to my toddler that they thought they would enjoy. Or like one girl wrote to me, I only met her once, and she had attended an event that I was at, and she said that I'd really made her feel welcome at that event and I'd really stuck with her. So she wanted to send something back to me whilst I was having difficulties in my own life. So people literally like dropping a lasagna on my front door.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
One person even set up a can't remember the name of the company, but essentially you could buy me a virtual coffee, and
Oh,
had sort of basically nearly 100 other freelancers spend £3 to buy me a coffee or
oh,
virtual coffee for like me and my partner when we were stuck in Great Ormond Street. And that meant that, you know, we could actually not worry so much that we're having to eat lunch out all the time, or travel costs,
right.
or the fact that we weren't really earning money when that was happening. You know, it wasn't covering our mortgage by any stretch of the means, but it was definitely a cash injection that was well needed at that time.
That's amazing, and it really stands to show just the generosity and the love that can come from so many people.
Yeah,
And I think that's important to celebrate because so many times people focus on the negativity and the selfishness of others and things like that. But people really pulled through for you, and it made a real difference to your life.
yeah, it really did. And I think especially a lot of those people are relationships I've made just in the last year through Instagram. And I think you know, the world of influencers and Instagram's come under a lot of flack in the last week, for, you know, things that are going on with
Yeah.
influencers in that space. And actually, for me, that really turns me off, and it makes me want to come off the platform. But I actually made some really lovely contacts and got some really lovely support from other fellow business owners on the platform, and it's been a really supportive tool for me.
That is awesome. I love that. And you needed that because
Yeah.
once your second child was actually finally born, after all the stress that you went through their pregnancy, he ended up being born with 3 congenital heart conditions, requiring multiple surgeries and prolonged care. So how in the world did you move forward from that?
I think I still am. And in fact, actually, if we're being honest, I had to move this podcast interview with you because the first time it was
Yeah.
booked in, I thought, I think I might cry all the way through.
Oh,
I think it's one of those things, it's not done, it's still going
yeah.
on. And actually, I think that sometimes can be the issue with people offering support, is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And we were bombarded when it first happened.
Yes.
But actually, we're still having regular checkups, and he will need open heart surgery again. We just don't
Oh,
know if it's going to be in 4 weeks or if it's going to be in 3 years. He
wow.
will definitely need probably a full repair around the time he's 3 or 4 years old, but one of the repairs they did, it could be sooner than that. So it's
Wow.
hard to plan and hard to make plans with friends or with people, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a level of anxiety, but also it forces us even more to be mindful of the type of clients that we work with and the type of work that we take on, so that if something does happen, that we're prepared and that we can, you know, drop everything and be there.
Yes.
And I've always had a rule of three of working with people, which is, do I like them? Can I do a good job? And do I believe in the product or service? And I think it's never, I think almost now there's like a fourth, which is, if I need to drop everything and run to hospital, are they going to be there? And when we were faced with this the first time, because Adrienne had planned, my partner had planned to take 2 weeks off paternity leave. And
Right.
obviously then, you know, after 5 days, we were moved to Great Ormond Street. On day 6, he nearly died. Um, And then he had planned open heart surgery a week and a half after that. And then he actually was remarkably home like a week and a half after that. So within a month, we were back. But then 3 weeks after that, he got an infection and we were back in hospital again. And it was looking like he was going to maybe have to have surgery again. And it was looking quite life threatening. But it kind of went down from a red alert to an amber. And then we switched to just having to stay in our local hospital for 3 weeks. So I was sleeping at the hospital at night and then coming home and having the local community nurse team visiting us in a day so that he could have his antibiotics 4 times over a 24-hour period for 4 weeks. So it was, we lost out on a few projects. We had to turn work away. So there started to be kind of financial pressures and challenges that we hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
Which made it tough as well. Obviously, money wasn't as important as our baby's health, but when you were wondering where the next paycheck's going to come from to cover the mortgage, it was an extra layer of stress. And particularly because when Adrienne joined the business with me, I thought, oh, well, I'll be back from hospital 24 hours after my C-section, and then I can just work on promoting him and pushing him out. And I'm very much like the marketeer PR side of the business.
Right.
He's a design creative side. So promoting the work he does doesn't come naturally to him. And I've always found that the way you get work is kind of by talking about work. So with me out of the picture and being based in the hospital, I didn't have the oomph to do that. So yeah, it's been I can't tell you what the answer is to that. I think we just took it one day at a time and tried to ask people for help when we needed it.
Yeah, I think that's a really crucial one, isn't it? I think, there's a lot of talk about that in terms of depression and other mental health illnesses. You see that in different, whether it's a radio ad or a television ad or, strewn across social media where people say when somebody's struggling, they're not going to just reach out and ask for help. And at the same time, other people around them, if they're not asking for help, don't know that they need help, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that we really talk openly and honestly about these things for a couple of reasons. One, I love that you were honest enough to share with the listeners that we needed to reschedule this because the first time you were just not in a good emotional state at that time. And that was just a month and a half ago or something like that. I can't remember, but it wasn't that long ago, right? So I think it's important that we talk about that because oftentimes, I'm really guilty for using the term overcoming limitations, which makes it sound like you leave them far behind and they never pop up again. But that's not really what I mean. For something like this, especially a health concern with your son, that he's going to need another open heart surgery. And then from there, as he grows up, you never know. But with anything that we're talking about, whether it's that negative voice in your head or whether it's financial struggles or whatever, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's not as simple as just leaving it behind. It's always going to crop up at some level, right? Even if your son ends up being completely healthy and doesn't even need that other open heart surgery, never mind anything else in the future, you're still always, as his mom that's gone through this trauma in the beginning, you're always going to have those little moments where something's going to remind you of that, and you're going to be right back to those times, right? And you're going to be emotional again, like it's happening all over again. So it's not about forgetting that it ever happened. It's about trying to find what works for you to cope with it. And I think that's very important that you were honest and said, at that day, I couldn't do the interview because I wasn't emotionally ready to do it. But now today, a few weeks later, I'm actually feeling like I can talk about it openly. And same thing with asking for help. I think just as much as we can say, when you're struggling, phone your bestie or go knock on your neighbor's door for a cup of tea or whatever. I think it's just as important that we just remind all the people that are close to us. So everybody that's listening has people that are close to them. Pay attention. Right, pay attention to what's going on in their lives, and if they kind of drop off the radar for a little bit, maybe that's a sign that they actually need some help.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that point as well, I would, it was a really tricky one. And I think a lot of people do find it tricky because if nobody asked me about it, I'd get annoyed that they weren't asking about it because I would be like,
Mm.
this has been a horrific time for me, not just with my baby, but I haven't even had the support of my parents there, and Adrienne's family are in France. So we did feel quite isolated and alone and unsupported from a family unit side. Um, but then other times people would fire questions at me and I think, oh, I just don't want to talk about it right now. It's too much. I'm in a good place. I'm having a good day. I don't want to be in a space. So I think it's
Yeah.
really difficult for people out externally to know, but maybe to even pose the question of, hey, do you want to talk about it today? Is it something you want to talk about today? Or and the other thing I think I was scared of doing is and I've talked about this with a couple of my close friends, is I was really scared of putting on people. I think by the time it got to the sickness with the baby, which was major, I'd already cried on a lot of people about my dad, and then I cried on the same
Right.
people about my mum, and then the baby came. I just thought, oh no, I'm going to be that friend that nobody wants to talk to or hear from, because if I phone, they're going to know that it's probably me phoning to cry. And if you ever experience extreme trauma like that at Great Ormond Street, they're really great at offering you free psychiatry service, which Adrienne and I were literally like, sign us up.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
give us as much as we can have. And she quite rightly pointed out, would we either of us feel the same if our friends had done this to us? And we were
Yes.
like, no, of course not. We'd want them to contact us. But it's still really hard to feel as a person to not be putting on to others.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Now, I mean, since we're talking about all of these health issues that, oh my gosh, with the family and your baby, do you have tips for other parents out there that are struggling with health issues, whether it's, within their immediate family or their extended family, their children themselves, whatever? Do you have any top tips for them?
I think one of the things that we found the most helpful was actually coming up. We sat down and we wrote a list of practical things that we needed help with. So whether that was help with childcare or giving us meals, or maybe somebody even covering it, so that, because a lot of the time Adrian and I weren't based in the same place. So
Right.
actually just even having some time together to be able to talk about what was happening without the children or during working hours was really helpful to us. Um, so I think just maybe trying to actually write down a list of things that you can ask and who might be the right people to ask them for, because people want to help. They often just don't know how.
Yes. That I love that because that reminds me of the advice that I used to give to couples when they were expecting especially their first child, is to do the same sort of thing where, because I used to be a childbirth educator, and that would be one of the big things that I would have a whole lesson about it is, people want to help. They don't know how to do it. And so they'll end up leaving you alone because they don't want to be intrusive and they don't want to be a bother. But if you ahead of time make a list out, these are all the things that I need done, and then you approach the people you feel comfortable with. Some of them you can even give a key and just be, I need you to come in and clean my house, or I need you to
Yeah.
come in and do this or that while I go and have a nap with my baby so that I can get my sleep that I need, or that the three of us can go in and cocoon together so that we can bond as a family. And people took that on board so easily. And yet here's the pretty much the exact same advice that you're giving for going through health issues within the family. It's remarkable to me that it's the same thing. You
Yeah.
need time to be a family unit. You need help with all these external things that are happening. And people are the same thing. They would love to help. They just don't know how. So tell them, write it out for them.
Yeah. And I had a kind of rule for myself, which was to make sure I took a walk outside every day, particularly if you're sat inside a hospital. It's really easy to
Yes.
just sit there. So take a break and don't sit with the patient all the time. It doesn't do either of you any good.
Yes.
So I'd always, take a walk, eat well. So that's another thing when it comes to, even if you're a friend looking for ideas. I've had a few people message me since saying, I've got a friend in Gosh, what should I do? And I was like, there's only so many microwave meals you can have which really has
Mm.
limited nutritional value. But the people who would turn up and say, oh, I've dropped you off a fresh salad for your lunch today, or
Oh.
a few of my clients, like one of my ex-clients was Moju, and they sent me a box of like ginger and turmeric shots.
Oh, I love it.
Kind of plant-based like ready meals. So I had some like healthy ready food to eat,
Yes.
which was really like just amazing at that time. And sleep. I mean, lots of people used to say to me, how are you sleeping? And I was like, actually really well. Because
Mm.
the stress was
Yeah.
making, and I'd had a C-section. That bit sort of got wiped out.
Oh, yeah.
Marching around bits of London after sort of day 4, that whole
Oh.
bit was almost irrelevant, but it did make me very tired. But even now, it's kind of like the rules for me and Adriana are like, do the weekly food shop to make sure that we eat well, that we take a walk every
Yeah.
day, and that we sleep. So obviously now I've got 2 children, and there's irregular sleeping patterns going on all over the shop with the clocks going back. So
Yeah.
sometimes I have been known to go to bed at 6:30 after I've put the other two to bed, and that's fine.
Yep. This is the perfect spot to take a quick break to talk about yogadownload.com, a website bringing you a huge range of yoga videos for you to download and enhance your home practice. I have a few favorite videos like the Yin Yoga for Self-Trust by Caitlin or the Yoga Ritual Evening Class by Mark. If you're like me and you love to practice yoga, or you're interested in getting started and finding out what yoga is all about, but you don't have the time to get to a yoga studio a few times a week, then this is a great solution. Head on over to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga, to find out more about this offer. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/yoga. This link can also be found in the show notes. If you're a Prime member, then you can now purchase your food shop from Amazon Fresh and have them deliver it the same day for free if your order is over £40. Do you like specialty items from local shops or Whole Foods market items? No problem. Amazon Fresh has you covered, all costing 9% less than your leading supermarket. You can get your free 30-day trial by heading to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. This link can also be found in the show notes. Are you ready to make some serious changes by living your life like you mean it? I've got just the thing for you. I've created a free 30-day challenge to help you transform your mindset and your emotional well-being. For 30 days, you'll receive a daily email packed with goodness, including a new mindset exercise for you to tackle, as well as fun things like meditations. All you need to do is to commit to this challenge by registering and then opening the emails each and every day and completing your challenges. Simple, right? If you said yes, then you're ready and you know that you deserve this. You can register for free by going to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/challenge. You can also find this link in the show notes. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? If you needed 8 hours of sleep before, then you need 8 hours of sleep now. You just might not get it all in one shot. So
Exactly.
take it when you can get it.
Exactly. I always used to take, like, my toddler sleeps for an hour and a half in the middle of the day. As soon as he goes
Yep.
up, I go down. Like,
Love it.
but I just think also on a practical level, it's the same actually in PR. Really, it's prevention. Things that I didn't think about with having insurance that covered my children. I only sorted out insurance for me and Adrienne. I didn't really have a kind of income protection that would affect me if I couldn't work based on my children.
Yes.
And I did put a maternity plan in place for myself to not work for a few months, but that didn't include Adrienne as well. So actually,
Right.
I kind of wish we'd had a bit more of a rainy day fund just to take the pressure off when we had our rainy days.
Yeah, it's a great word of advice for everybody, no matter what stage they are, isn't it? I mean, all the financial experts say, you know, you should put a certain percentage of your income aside for, you know, you just never know what. If you end up spending it on something that's lovely and wonderful, great. But if it ends up being something that you weren't anticipating and it takes the stress off because you actually have the money there, how much better is that, right?
Mm.
Now, I want to talk, we don't need to talk too much about your actual business if you don't want, but I mean, you've got this amazing PR business that you started, the Wern,
Yeah.
right? And you've got your husband wrapped up in there with you,
Yeah.
and this all was coming about at the same time as all these different health issues were happening with everybody in your family. I mean, I'm shaking my head over here. I just can't even imagine being an entrepreneur myself, what you were going through. But I think most of the listeners, if they've got children, they can at least relate to the struggles that you have, right? The struggles are real when you're trying to have a career and balance parenthood. So, I mean, I would imagine that that pressure is even greater when the career is your own entrepreneurship. It's your own business, everything riding on the line. And especially when you're just really building that business and you also are dealing with parenthood. So do you have any top tips for our listeners on how to juggle all of that?
No. No, I think, you know what, I had the business. It's now, I've actually just turned 5 years old in the last week. And
Oh, congratulations.
thank you. But it has definitely changed iterations in that time, because it's probably on its kind of third or fourth rebirth, if you like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I think, to be honest, I do put my face forward as the face of the business, and I made a deliberate move to do that from January this year. And that actually was a challenge, and but also a positive, because by being the face of the business, if I need help, I can ask for it and people support me. I give out a lot of free advice so people know that I know what I'm talking about. But it meant when things are difficult, I wouldn't always, especially on like my work feed, I didn't necessarily go into huge amounts of detail of what was happening, but I did explain what was happening behind the scenes, and it meant the community could then support. There's lots of pockets online for freelancers, and I often see people who are struggling on personal branding photography or finding a designer or legal forms. So I think actually just using the online platforms to engage with other people in your network and ask for help when you need it. I think everybody's so great at passing on knowledge of great people that they've worked with. So I think for me, like the kind of parent entrepreneur hybrid is an emerging market. A lot of us are leaving our jobs to set up businesses after we've had children, or we're having business pivots in our 30s. You know, I think I've got so many more friends now who set up businesses since having children.
Yep.
I just think we're all there sort of supporting each other and cheering each other on. So just lean on each other.
I love that. And you know, since you have brought up some of that, I just wanna, I'm interested to know if you think it would make a difference at all if you were on a standard maternity leave when all of this went down, particularly with your second child, with your son. Do you think that that would have affected your mental health more?
I really do think it would have been worse if I had been on a standard maternity leave,
Yeah.
mainly because you wouldn't be doing anything other than just being around for that child. And I think, especially in the early weeks when we
Yep.
first got home and I had patches of time to just sit and think about it, it was almost too dangerous for me to go down that rabbit hole. The
Right.
risk of postnatal depression is quite high anyway, for me, because there's a lot of depression and mental health issues in my family. But also the statistics of getting postnatal depression after a massive bit of trauma is quite, like post-traumatic stress, is quite high. And I was really
Right.
mindful of that. So when I had too much time on my own, I would worry that I would get sucked into what was happening. And I remember being able to attend an event quite early on that mentally I was thinking, why are you doing this? You don't need to be speaking right now. I wasn't being paid. I wasn't promoting the book per se. It was just a panel on female entrepreneurs and how they got to where they've got to. But actually, it was really cathartic to have a moment that was just reflective to me, and in a room full of people that didn't know anything about what was going on with my baby or my parents. So everybody was just interested in me and my career. And
Right.
so having that kind of silo of the business and being able to kind of focus on that really gave me a lot of strength.
Yes. So, Lucy, what's going on now with the situation with both your parents and your son?
Do you know what? I literally found out today that my mum's being let out of hospital tomorrow.
Oh, exciting.
So my dad, hopefully his mental health is going to improve a lot more for having her at home. But
Yes.
that's been nearly 6 months that she's been on recovery. But 50% of people who have brain aneurysms don't even survive. So, she's doing really
Wow.
well. She still can't walk and she's still got a few mobility issues, but she's got her speech back. She's there. Her brain's all there. So that's great. And with Bo, the baby, it's just constant monitoring and just us kind of taking one day at a time with that, really,
Yeah.
and trying to just make sure that I kind of talk about it with people, but not dwell on it.
Yes. Now, with your mom, with her mobility issues and things like that, will there be help for them at their house, or is that something that you're going to have to pick up?
No, luckily they are getting a care package.
Oh,
So
thank
she's going to
goodness.
have visitors and she's going to have a physio package. I don't know how long that will last for, but at least in the sort of the short term, it should be good.
That is wonderful. Now, with going through all of this, particularly with the baby, has it changed the way that you work or the way that you look at life, or what kind of changes has this had on your life?
I think it definitely has made me really grateful for the fact that me and Adrienne run our own business and how lucky we are to be able to drop everything when we need to. I've seen other families really struggle where normally it comes back to the guy going back to work, and in
Mm,
some cases not feeling mentally able to do that and having to give up working to do long stints in hospital. So it's a really difficult thing. So we have a lot of flexibility in our work, and I think we will continue to have that flexible model so that if and when we do need to drop everything, we are able to do that.
yeah.
And that will affect the kind of clients and the work that we do. We won't be taking on kind of long projects over months at a time. Adrian in particular kind of does sort of he can work a lot quicker than I can. It normally takes me a few months to build up momentum with people's profiles. So I'm going to have a much more kind of flexible approach and have to be quite honest and upfront with people that this is a risk of something that might happen. So I
Yeah.
can't work necessarily on a big launch because that's a fixed date. But if it's somebody's ongoing profile, for example, that's not as time sensitive, then I'll be able to do that. But I am lucky that Adrian is a very hands-on father, and we can kind of share the mental load at home.
That's awesome. What other support do you have? I mean, I know that the online community really rallied around you, which is wonderful. But do you have any ongoing support for both of you now?
So with ongoing support, I think we're actually really analysing. We've always had like loads and loads of friends, but actually we kind of need to knuckle down on our more family unit. So we're trying to spend more time with our closer friends, particularly with the children. When the kids first came, or especially with my first child, we would meet up with our friends, without him, or when we had a babysitter, so that it could be a bit more like old times. And that actually unstuck us a bit when we needed help with people looking after him, because he didn't know them.
Right.
So we're making much more of an effort to get some strong kind of figureheads of our friends in our children's lives that they know. We're also having a lot of support from our local hospital and from Great Ormond Street. So we still have ongoing psychological support from Great Ormond Street. And Adrian and I, that's with us together as a family. And then separately, we also have our own kind of individual therapist that we speak to, because we come at it from a different angle. Adrian also had a congenital heart issue as a child. So he's got a whole different perspective on what's happening with the baby than I do.
Right. Wow, that is really fascinating. And that is so great that you've got the ongoing professional help as well, as your circle of friends. Now, I mean, everybody can relate to going through some sort of difficult struggle in their lives. I mean, maybe this kind of seems a little extreme, I've got to admit, having all of this all at once. But I mean, everybody, knows what it's like to fall on hard times, or to be, in a difficult state. And I found that when I went through one of my difficult times, I was really surprised by the people who showed up. That some of the people that had been in my life for nearly my whole life were nowhere to be seen. And people that I had just met, that I'd only been friends with for a couple of months, were letting me crash on their sofa. They were the ones taking me out for tea or lunch, or, they were the ones that, in my opinion, hardly knew me compared to, my other long-term friends. So did you find anything similar, where there was just, not necessarily that anybody let you down, but that there was some unexpected help from places that you just wouldn't have expected to see, other than obviously the online community, which is amazing in itself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the first things that I did when I found out I was going to Great Ormond Street was reach out to an old colleague of mine that I guiltily hadn't been in touch with for quite a long time. And I got in touch with him because his child had also had a long stay at Great Ormond Street. And I contacted him and said, what do I do? How do I take any control? And he pointed out to me that I would to prepare myself for the fact that some people would be amazing and some people would be awful. And that's actually one of the struggles that many people have. And from talking to the psychiatrist at Gosh, she said it's a very common thing that lots of us have the support when we're in the hospital, but when we get home, we don't feel we have the support from the people around us. So yeah, I definitely found that there were people that I was expecting to kind of just show up that didn't. And then I had other friends who had, I had one friend who's got 3 children, who lives in Cambridge, who drove down to London just to see me for 5 minutes and make me a cup of tea. So there were moments that were really touching. And then there were other moments that were just, I definitely felt a bit let down by some people. And, even my parents, because my mum wasn't even really conscious of what was happening, and because my dad was so wrapped up with what was happening with my mum, he also wasn't really able to be there. So it was hard, and it almost, going back to sort of that point of earlier, I did worry about putting too much pressure on people, so I spread out the upset quite thinly, so I'm not sure anybody really got a view of how difficult it was for us at times, because I would just be in contact when I was laughing and smiling. But actually all the people who sent cards or wrote handwritten letters were the best, because with the text messages I'd sort of sit there and reply to them, but they'd fall out of my head, whereas the letters I would sit and reread. Really cathartic.
That's so nice. And I do like, you don't want to put a mask on and make it seem like everything is great when it's not great. But I think that it is also equally just as important to have that friends or family or people that you are close enough with that you can just have those moments of normalcy, those moments of laughter where you can just try to be a normal person, just be Lucy, right? For even if it's just 5 minutes. And then rest assured, of course, you'll be, pull yourself back into the drama that is going on in your life. But I think, for those people that get to have those little glimpses, I think that that's just as important, as long as it's not, you know, forsaking the struggles that you're going, as long as you're not putting on the mask so that that other person or people don't feel bad for what's going on. I think it is okay for you to laugh and smile and have a good time, even if it's only for a few moments. I think
Yeah,
that can do a world of good for your mental health.
definitely. But and also it was hard because it would be deceptive. I would show up to things and people would be like, "Oh, you're smashing it. You're doing so well." And I think, yeah, you're seeing me in this 1 hour. Of course, it
Yeah.
looks like that. But then I'm going back home and getting back into my tracksuit and tying my hair back up. And,
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
all what it looks like.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for us to have a conversation like this, right? And just be real and honest about how life can be so difficult sometimes, right? And that's okay. Life that doesn't mean that you don't have a positive mindset or you're not you're not doing the right thing or anything like that. You've got to honor yourself in whatever you need. And if you need to hibernate for a little bit, if you need to have a laugh with somebody else, if you need to cry on somebody else's shoulder, whatever you need is okay. And it's just like needing to cry for the loss of not having your second son be born healthy and free of this condition, and mourn the loss of not having healthy parents that were able to be there for you in your time of need. There's nothing wrong with expressing that, right, in whatever way you need to do that. So, Lucy, thank you so much for being on and being so open and honest with us. How can people find you if they want to follow you on social media, learn more about your story, or get more information on your book that's about to launch, or the PR business that you've got, anything that we've talked about? How can they go about finding you?
So on all social channels, I am on @Wern Chat, which is WERN Chat. And the book is called Hype Yourself. And if you Google it, you can find it on Amazon or all good bookshops. It's out on January the 9th on 2020. And for the kind of PR business, you can visit thewern.com, which has all the sort of information about all the products and services that Adrienne and I do.
That's marvelous. And I will put all the links to all of this in the show notes. So you can just go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog and you will find the show notes there for Lucy's episode. And you can go ahead and find all the links for that if you are without pen and paper right now. Lucy, thank you so much for being on the show and for your openness and your honesty with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
What an incredible situation Lucy and her family have faced and will continue to face for years to come. She's learning as she goes, which is what we all need to do. What works for one person isn't guaranteed to work for the next, so you need to experiment with different ideas to see what works for you. And Lucy's tips are a great place to start. My favorite, which I really believe is applicable to any situation, is to ask for help. Make a list of practical things you need help for, like meals, childcare, or even time together as a couple or family. And then reach out to the people you're comfortable enough with to ask to give you this help. People want to help. Think about the last time you knew someone who was going through a difficult time, whatever that looked like for them. You felt helpless, right? We all do. Even when it's someone we barely know, we wish we could do something, anything. The thing is, people don't want to intrude, overstay their welcome, or impose. Again, you know what this feels like too. You knew when your neighbor was going through something and maybe you put a casserole on their front stoop to help them out. And you would have done more, but you just didn't want to bring it up. You figured they had their hands full and didn't need you prying into their life or some such thing, right? You also convinced yourself that if they needed more from you, they'd ask. But what's stopping you from asking is the same thing that stopped them. They didn't want to be a burden. We've all been there. But the truth of the matter is, you wanted to help, and they needed help, just like you do now. So ask. Be specific. Have a list ready and ask them to choose something from it, or just pick something for them. They won't feel like you're a burden. They'll welcome the opportunity to help. And if I'm wrong, they'll say so. It's as simple as that. Thank you to my guest today, Lucy Werner, for being so open with us about what she's going through and how she's finding her way through it all. As usual, you can find all the links for Lucy's website and social media platforms in the show notes. Just go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Now, no matter what it is you're going through right now, go make a list of ways you could use some help in your life.
Thanks for listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Head on over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. If you love the show, leave a rating and review. Share that love by spreading the word. Post a link to your social media. Share it with your friends and follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast hosting site. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, remember to live your life on purpose by living life like you mean it.